Kamloops in the last 25 years where they've been out of heroin or out of fentanyl or out of cocaine or out of any drug you want to buy. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without fail. The law chases society, not the other way around. So the law never leads society. Society leads the law. And that's something so it's not things that are going to make you happy. You get older and you get a bit reflective and you realize it's never going to be stuff. It's going to be experiences. It's going to be the things you do.
Right.
Immortality. Yeah.
Oh, immortality.
I don't know. I don't know you want to live forever. But hey, I'm just,
Hello everyone. In today's podcast, we have a lawyer and a professor. He has been a lawyer for over 36 years. And in this podcast, we spoke a lot about different legal aspects in Canada and many more interesting questions. You'll surely get to know a lot about him and know more insights on the Canadian law. So without any delay, let's get started. Hello, Mr. Jonathy. Firstly, a very warm welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling fine. It's the end of the day, so I'm feeling relieved. Another day of classes tomorrow, of course, but that's okay. That's why I'm here.
Awesome. So firstly, could you please tell me a little bit about yourself? Like, where are you from and when did you find your passion towards law?
I'm from here. I'm from Kamloops. I was born here. I grew up in a big family of 7 kids, and from a reasonably young age, probably from high school, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, without really understanding what it is that a lawyer does, or what that meant. We all have this kind of movie image or TV image of what a lawyer is. In fact, most lawyers aren't that. And so, but I thought that would be a good path for me. And so I did what was then a university transfer program at what was then Caribou College. There was no university here. And so I did my first 2 years of a commerce degree at what was then Caribou College. I got into the UBC Sauder School of Business. It wasn't called it that then either, but that's what it's called today. And I finished my commerce degree and my law degree at UBC. So I have what's called a Bachelor of Commerce and a Juris Doctor from UBC. And I came back to Kamloops because that's where I thought I'd like to practice. I thought I wanted to go to Vancouver and be a lawyer in Vancouver, but really, after living there for 5 years, I realized that's probably not what I really wanted. At that point, I'm engaged. I'm thinking about families and the things I want in life, and so Kamloops made a lot of sense. So I moved back to Kamloops after graduating to work for a law firm here, and I've been a lawyer. I'm still a lawyer today. So been a lawyer for 36 years.
Wow, that's amazing. So since you've lived most of your life over here, what has it been like for you to watch the country's legal aspect evolve over the period of time?
Well, Canada really became sort of you could argue that Canada became an independent country in 1982 when we adopted the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's when we repatriated our constitution from the UK. We have our own constitution. We're sort of, not that we weren't an independent country before then, but we adopted a framework of laws and how we're going to run in our constitution in April of 1982. I started law school in 1984, so you can imagine this shiny new constitution was something we're paying a lot of attention to. And so that really sort of, I think, informed a lot of our studies, where the world's going to be going, where this constitution will take us. And in 1982, people weren't talking about things like gay marriage. They weren't talking about things like same or transgender rights or medical assistance in dying or legalized cannabis or a lot of things, right? And so society is going to evolve and will continue to evolve into the future. And we now perhaps look back on people's viewpoints from 50 years ago or 40 years ago even as being quaint and out of date. And I suspect the same will be true 40 years from now. I don't know that I'll be around to see that, but those who are, I think, will reflect upon, when they were in their 20s and some things that they thought, and, maybe when they're in their 50s or 60s, it won't feel that way anymore. I think people tend to moderate their views and sort of understand that society will evolve in ways that maybe we didn't anticipate.
True. But what is your view on the medical assistance in dying?
Well, it's your life at some point. The decision to end your life is a rational one, where you don't have a lot of good time left in front of you. And do you want to spend a month in agony suffering from a terminal cancer, or do you want to end your life on your own terms? That can be, I think, a very rational thing for people. And it's a choice I think they should be able to make. There are some people who, for religious reasons, would not choose medical assistance in dying. We should respect that too.
Yeah.
Okay, but the fundamental thing about freedom of religion is that that means you don't impose your religion on other people either, right? You can't have freedom of religion if you don't have freedom from religion, right? So no one's religion can be imposed on anyone else. We should respect your religious choices. And if you say, well, my faith wouldn't allow me to make that choice, then don't make it.
Right. Absolutely. So, how and when did you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, I'd say I was probably in junior high school. I was probably 13 or 14, and that struck me as something that I would see myself doing. Again, without really having an appreciation for that. My dad was a tradesman, he was an electrician. I don't come from a family of lawyers. Like my own children grew up, they knew what a law firm was. They'd been in one, they knew their dad was a lawyer. They have a much clearer idea of what that means. You have this romantic notion of what a lawyer is, and that sounds like something I could do. Um, so that's kind of, in your mind, you think, yeah, that's something I could see myself being.
Okay. But how smooth or hard has it been for you in this journey to become a
I
lawyer?
often go and speak at my old high school on the North Shore, NorCam. And students will often say, "Oh, it's going to take too long. It's going to cost too much." And I always smile at them and say, "None of those excuses work on me. I'm from here. I went to this high school. I don't come from a rich family. I don't have any particular advantage. And you just decide that's what you're going to do, and you go and you do it. And so if you want to get worried about the time or the money commitment, there's lots of excuses. None of them work. Just go and
Yeah.
do it."
Awesome. So, is there any case that you fought and won, or that?
I wasn't a litigator per se. I did some smaller trials earlier in my career, but I was mostly a deal maker, right? And most lawyers are. Like we facilitate transactions, we negotiate, we put deals together. Things I'm proud of. I've done a lot of seniors housing developments where we provide affordable housing to low income seniors, and that work is rewarding. Certainly, that some of the things I felt I can look around this community and look at projects that I've been involved in with some pride and know that there are low income seniors living in decent housing, in part, not, it's a team effort, right? But in part, due to some of my efforts and some of the things that I've done,
Mhm.
you can be a difference maker from wherever you are. One of the things, it's sad that the local chapter of Habitat for Humanity shut down, but when they came to town initially and they wanted to set up, I set them up. I paid out of my pocket all the costs. I thought Habitat for Humanity, people trying to build housing for people who can't afford it is a good thing. And so that was something I got involved in early in my career. And those are the kinds of things I think you can do. I've been on the school board. I've been on city council. I've always tried to the university foundation raising money for students. I've been involved in all of those kinds of things to give something back to my community and try to make the world a little bit better place. Again, not just me, of course, working with very fine people and trying to, work together and try to raise money for scholarships or whatever we're doing. So,
Yeah, totally. That's amazing. Because I have personally seen you helping
oh
students
yeah,
with different things. So that's really amazing of you.
it's good for your soul.
I think in the age and era where people are very greedy and money minded, the fact that you are doing it selflessly says a lot about you for
Well,
sure.
you realize, I was talking with some law students this morning because we are going over some things. I said, it's not things that are going to make you happy. You get older and you get a bit reflective and you realize it's never going to be stuff. It's going to be experiences. It's going to be the things you do, not the things you have. And focus on that and you'll be fine, right? I'm not Buddhist, but there's a great Buddhist expression. If you focus on what you want, you'll never be happy. If you focus on what you need, you'll always be happy. And that's a good way of looking at the world. So that's a philosophy that I adopt. Well, not being Buddhist is that is true. I think things make you unhappy. It's your desires that thinking that you need to have the newest car or the fanciest this or that. That's what makes you unhappy. It's that desire for things makes you
Like
unhappy.
generally, like how long does it take for a case to get solved? Like first,
Well, I mean, typical litigation is going to take, presuming you go to trial, it's going to take a couple of years, okay, from start to finish. So the day you walk into the lawyer's office versus the day you walk out of the courthouse for a typical trial, probably be about 2 years. And that's a long and expensive process. Obviously, we're trying to avoid that if we can. You're much better off to try to work out a solution. And all the way along, like, if you look at all the lawsuits that are started versus all the ones that actually go in front of a judge, it's maybe 10%.
Oh.
like most of the time you settle, right?
Hmm.
And most of the time there's a deal to be had. And as you get closer to trial, your outcomes become more narrow. You have a better idea of what is looking, what the future looks like, and so you're more and more likely to make a deal. And some things go to trial. Obviously, there are trials, and some things need a judge's decision. But it's an expensive, drawn out choice, and you should try to avoid it if you can. That'd be my advice generally to my clients. Is trials are not fun, they're not cheap, and they're not fast.
True.
So it's probably something you ought to avoid if you can.
So talking about TRU, it is said that like international students in TRU are coming from 100 different
Mhm.
countries. So having the fact that there are, like, in your classes, there are people from different
Mhm.
places, from different legal
Mhm.
backgrounds, how hard is it to the
There are
Canadian aspect?
overarching concepts in law, that we can't cause harm to other people, and we might be held responsible if we do, and we might be held responsible in criminal law. We might be held responsible for the damages that we cause. And so the idea of what's called retributive justice, like punishment for crimes, is where you get retribution. Yeah, I mean, if you murder someone in most countries, there'll be a legal consequence for that. And so the idea of understanding the fundamentals of justice, we put a Canadian lens on it. Obviously, here's the rules while you're here, and those could be rules. I mean, you're from India. There's no cannabis stores, no legal ones, at least in India,
No.
and here they're everywhere, right?
Right.
And that's because that's the law here. I can't go to India as a Canadian and say, well, I get to smoke marijuana in India because I'm Canadian. No, you're in India now. India's rules apply. Likewise, if you're an Indian citizen, you want to go into a cannabis shop, you're 19, go ahead. Canada's rules apply while you're here. Okay, so law is a function of place. And so if you're going to be here, you should probably understand what the laws are here.
Right. So my next question is on drugs
Mm,
itself. So talking about drugs, I see a lot of druggists
mm,
out there because the cannabis is like
mm,
legal. Even the teenagers can go and get it and
mm,
try, in an age where they're not even conscious enough to take decisions if it's right or wrong for
mm.
them. It's very damaging in the
Well, I mean,
sense, if you see.
I don't smoke anything. I have mild asthma, so I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't smoke anything. I'm not a person who's inclined to drink much, or it's just not how I'm wired. I don't enjoy it. It's not anything like you'll never see me drunk because I don't drink enough to get drunk. I might have a glass of wine on occasion, but I go weeks without drinking. So it's not something that matters to me from a personal standpoint. But I also think, again, in a free and democratic society, you get to make choices. Sometimes they're not the best choices, right?
Like,
We ought not to eat too much because obesity is really bad for our health. We ought not to drink too much because that's bad for our mental health and our liver and our life expectancy. We ought not to take cannabis,
right?
especially when we're younger. But do you legislate that, or you try to educate people to make informed choices? Because putting people in jail for that is also maybe not the solution. When I was in high school, people were smoking marijuana. It was completely illegal. Okay,
Right.
and so this is not a new problem.
Okay.
Now, there are other drugs that are, relatively speaking, new, like fentanyl and some of these other things that obviously take an incredible grip on people. They give up absolutely everything that matters to them. They give up they're literally in rags on a street corner,
Yeah.
abandon all personal relationships they've had with family and friends, and spend every dime they've had.
Yeah.
So
So,
the
like,
grip that this has on them is astonishing.
okay.
Um, how we deal with that, will there have to be new approaches? Well, I'm not an expert, obviously, in medicine, but I think that there's got to be a better way than what we're doing. What we're doing isn't working. And so it's going to take a science-focused medical approach. It's a medical health issue. That's the way I look at it. There's never been a day in Kamloops in the last 25 years where they've been out of heroin or out of fentanyl or out of cocaine or out of any drug you want to buy. It's
Mhm.
available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without fail. So the notion that you can control supply by making it illegal is laughable. It's just not true. It's never been true.
Mm.
Okay, we've never had a time in our history where we have been able to, through law enforcement, control the flow of drugs.
And my next question is about AI.
Mm.
So many people talk about how AI is replacing the jobs and stuff like that. What do you think about law?
AI is a tool. When I started practicing law, I'm old, right? And I've been a lawyer for 36 years. We used to have to cite up cases. And what that meant is, well, this case is interesting. Where else is it being used?
Right.
And we go into these, volumes of the. We have to go through this book and then that book, and we look things up, and it would take you 2, 3, 4 hours to cite up a case. You might have an old case. It's a really good case. I wonder if it's ever been applied in another case. Now, again, this is before AI. Push one button, and literally in less than a second, every time this case has ever been cited anywhere in Canada pops up. I've looked at my own decisions. I write decisions for the Health Professions Review Board to see where they've been cited by other people and other boards and other things, and just to sort of, I'm curious. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, it's infinitely easier than it was. And I tell my students, you have no idea what a pain that was and how long that took and how useless, you know, that was compared to today and how much better it is. Now that we get rid of lawyers, no, we just focus on the things that are less tedious. It's like word processors. I started work, I didn't have a computer on my desk. Okay,
Mhm.
most secretaries didn't have. They had very rudimentary word processors where they literally feed the paper in, and the thing would type. But it
Yes,
was a
the
very very
typewriter.
basic. It's called an AES machine, and they had IBM Selectrics where they could put these mag cards in, and it would type some basic precedent things. Very crude. Okay. Now, of course, precedents are everywhere. We have software that fills things in automatically, and yet there's a shortage of legal assistants. There's a shortage of lawyers. BC does not graduate enough lawyers, like law students. We actually hire more law students than we graduate in the 3 universities in BC. So the notion that all these jobs are up for grabs, I don't know that I believe it. So, obviously some things will become a little easier. I think coding and some other things you might not need the same amount of people, but at the same time, there'll be other jobs that we never thought about that will exist.
Mhm.
You know that no one knew someone who manages a web page, or like podcasts didn't exist when I was starting out. Like, people do different things, right? And one of my favorite past what I love watching old science fiction movies from the 50s or the 1940s because they're hilarious.
Right.
Because what they thought the future would look like is laughably wrong. They'll have some spaceship that goes faster than light. They got big knobs and dials, and they're steering it like this, and it's hilarious that this bucket of bolts could do the
Do
things that
anything.
they. And it's just, you look at these old, they go, they're going, they're multi-planetary, but they've got this microphone on a big cord, and
Yeah.
it's just, you look at it and go, yeah, whatever we're predicting, we're wrong. We're completely wrong about what the future is going to look like. That those movies always tell me, yeah, whatever we think it's going to look like, it's not going to look like that. Okay, we're laughably wrong all the time about the
Mhm.
future. So this fear of AI, automation and robots and this and that. Robots are going to kill out, like, jobs in auto assembly. People still work there.
Yeah.
Not as many people. Well, it's not as many people on an assembly line for cars as there once was, but there's still some.
Right.
And people go on and do other things that we never thought about.
True. It'll give rise to
Yeah.
better, like bigger other jobs.
Yeah.
Right. So, what is your perspective on the balance between justice and legal system in Canada? Do you feel like the law always serves the justice, or there is room for improvement?
There's always room for improvement. The systems are imperfect. Perfection's never attainable. It's one of the reasons most lawyers, for example, are against the death penalty. Not that we think some people deserve it. Probably there's some pretty horrible people who've done some pretty horrific things, and you can make a pretty good argument.
Yeah.
But that's not most people who are sentenced for murder, right? Most murderers are drunken fights, and the system is too imperfect to give that perfect a remedy. We understand its flaws. People lie, evidence gets lost, things happen. People who have been convicted of murder were found later to be innocent.
Hmm.
Okay, so we know the system's imperfect. It's always can be improved. It's a pretty safe country, but not when we look at Japan, or we look at the UK, or we look at France or Denmark or some of these other countries. Their rates of crime are much lower than ours. Their violent rates of crime are significantly lower. So what are they doing that we're not doing? Why
Hmm.
is that? Those are, I
Right.
think, really important questions in terms of how we can improve as a society. And likewise, our American friends they have triple the homicide rate, not like per capita, the homicide rate that we do. You're 3 times more likely to be murdered in the United States than Canada.
Yeah.
So if you're an American, you might be saying, well, what's Canada? What is Canada doing that we're not doing? Why are less people in jail in Canada?
Yeah.
Why are the penalties not as severe in Canada, and yet they have lower rates of crime? Clearly, jails aren't the answer.
Right. Right.
And then as Canadians, we look at France, or we look at the UK, or we look at Japan, or we look at Germany or Denmark. why is their crime rate so much lower than ours?
Right.
Like, why? What are they doing that we're not doing? If you go and look at some prisons, they take a different approach to prisons, and maybe we should be looking at that approach, right? Like, again, there's always room to improve and learn.
That's true. That's so. What legal challenges do you think Canadian society will face in the next 20 years?
No, society usually goes ahead of the law. The law chases society, not the other way around. So the law never
Mm,
leads society. Society leads the law. And that's something that so you tend to see the law being a little bit behind public sentiment.
that's interesting.
And if you did a survey, and I'm because again, you have the advantage of youth and the disadvantage of youth. But if you did a survey in 1982, when I was, when the Constitution was passed, and you asked the public, how do you feel about gay people getting married? You probably would have had 70% against, maybe 30%. Yeah, I'm making those numbers up. It was not a majority. Okay,
Right.
this was not something that we felt was imminent. If you ask that question today, you reverse those numbers at least. Probably 80% of people say, yeah, it's not a big deal. I don't understand what the thing is. Maybe 20 to 30% would say, no, we should make it illegal again.
Mm,
If that, if the, I don't know those. I'm just making those numbers, but generally speaking, it's broadly accepted.
mm,
Okay, and so there comes a tipping point in some social issues where it just becomes the norm, right?
right.
Again, society will evolve and continue to evolve.
That's awesome. Perfect. So, finally, one message you would like to give to all the youngsters out there who want to become future lawyers?
You know, if your goal is law, there's lots of people who would like to have a chat with you about that. And if you're a business student, or I have lots of art students, they just, hey, what's it like? What would you recommend?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would generally say your undergrad should be something that you love, because you might decide you don't want law school. Law school might decide it doesn't want you. And so you want to have something, get an education, something you have a passion for, because that may end up being where you go.
Right.
So don't take something because you think that will get you into law. Take something that you're good at and that you enjoy, and that's what you're going to do well at. That'd be thing one, I would tell you, because law doesn't care what your undergrads did; they just care that you did well.
Right.
Okay, and number two, the best practice is a law school admission test called the LSAT. The best preparation for the LSAT is to write LSATs, right? So the more practice exams you write, the better. It's the advice I give my own son, who's graduating from law school this spring. That's the advice I give to lots of students. Write an LSAT, then write another one, then write another one, then write another one, then write another one. Under exam conditions, with the time limits, and really work through, because the more exams you write, the better you get at it.
Mm,
Because you need a good LSAT score, you need good grades.
right.
Okay, and those are the two. The hardest part about becoming a lawyer is getting into law school. So get into law school, right? And so that would be advice number one. The nice thing about law, what I would say is a real positive, is law is a broad profession. Lawyers show up all over the place. TRU's got lawyers on staff. TRU's got, they don't have any dentists on staff at TRU, but they got lawyers. Okay, lots of large corporations have lawyers. They don't have, general practitioners or surgeons on it. They have no reason for that, right? It's not. I'm not trying to pick on dentists, but if you decide to become a dentist, you can be a dentist or not a dentist. It's not a lot of, oh, we need dentists in all these other walks of life, right?
Right.
Whereas lawyers, they're in government, they're in policy, they're in private practice, they're in institutions, they're in corporations, kind of like accountants that way, right? And so you show up all over the place. It's a broad career. You can do all kinds of interesting things, and so it can be very rewarding. It's a hard, stressful job that pays well. It turns out all jobs that pay well are hard and stressful.
They are hard
So
for
that's
sure.
how life is, right? And so we like to complain sometimes. People who make a lot of money and work very hard complain about that, but they also make a lot of money doing it.
That's
So
it.
that's the deal you make
Right.
when you go into private practice.
Awesome. So my final question is, who do you think will be the next Prime Minister of Canada?
It's early days. I think we'll have an election this year. A lot of the anger was directed towards Mr. Trudeau, rightly or wrongly. Of course, that's everyone's got a view on that.
Yeah.
But he's gone. So now what? Does that anger spill over to the new leader, whoever that ends up being?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Once you get into an election, the opposition leader is under a bit more scrutiny. He refuses to get security clearance. There's some weird things on that side. The other parties, will Mr. Singh remain as the leader of the NDP? What's going to happen in Quebec? there's a lot of balls in the air right now, right?
Right.
Obviously, the polls point to the conservatives. That's probably the way to bet, but we have elections for a reason, right?
Right.
And so things can change between today and election day in ways that we never thought about. When Trudeau was first elected, Stephen Harper, if you had this conversation 3 months before Stephen Harper ran for re-election, he was going to win the next election.
Mm-hmm.
He was ahead in the polls. It was all pointing in his direction, and they lost. It was a Liberal majority.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so we'll see.
Right.
It's the short answer. Long, I guess, if I were to bet, I'd probably bet on the Conservatives, just because it seems to be, uh, if polls are any indication of that being true. But that said, um, elections are held for a reason,
Okay.
and a lot can happen between now and then.
For sure. Awesome. So now that we're almost towards the end of the podcast, I have one fun round for you,
Okay.
and that is the rapid fire round.
Okay.
My first question is, if you would become the Prime Minister of Canada, what is the one thing that you want to change?
I would really want to change the criminal justice system in a way that we start to emulate our friends in Europe in terms of really looking at rehabilitation. How do we get people back into society? Maybe there's too much focus on punishment and not enough focus on changing people's behavior. And that seems to be a focus that I see other places. That seems to it ends up with less people in prison, lower rates of crime, lower rates of violent crime. And again, our objectives should be to reduce crime. And so how do we do that? And it's clearly not jails, because if that were true, the United States would be much safer than Canada, because they have way more people in jail per capita and way tougher sentencing. It doesn't seem to reduce crime. So what I would think we really need to kind of change our whole way of looking at that.
Okay. So is Mr. Jonathy a friendly person or a strict person?
I think you know the answer to that. I'm pretty friendly. I'm a sociable guy. I like my students and they like me because, we get along well. I'm happy to be here. I think what I do is interesting and fun, and hopefully my students do too.
True. Awesome. So, do you have any go-to legal movie or a TV show?
Remember, the one I kind of liked was The Verdict. It had Paul Newman and some others in it. That was a fun one to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Most TV shows and movies about the law are a bit unrealistic. People only have one client, and they don't really get into this. This is a heavy slog. You got a lot of clients, you got a lot of things on the go. It doesn't lend itself to a movie script, right? Everyone's got the one file and the one client. Even doctor show, they have one patient. Doctors never have one patient. Doctors have 100 patients, right?
Exactly.
And so that side of it always is a bit unrealistic. But yeah, that's probably one I remember well. The Verdict. I thought that was a well-crafted movie.
Okay, awesome. So, one principle that you always stick to in your life?
Be your authentic self, right? Like tell the truth. Be that honorable person. You got less to remember. Life's easier that way.
True. What's the most rewarding part of being a lawyer?
There's a certain amount of prestige, I suppose, that comes with being a lawyer. You kind of understand how the system works. Once people find out you're a lawyer, they kind of treat you a little bit differently because they're a little alive to the fact that you understand how things work.
Yeah.
I've dealt with police officers. Once they find out I'm a lawyer, their demeanor changes quite a lot. And so, there is some advantages to being an expert in the law, for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. So, are you a tea person or a coffee person?
Coffee. I mean, I like tea. I have tea in the afternoon sometimes because coffee will keep me awake if I drink too much of it. But in the morning, I love my cup of coffee.
Awesome. So, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Depends on the day. I'm getting better at getting up early because I have early classes. I'd probably be more of a night owl, to be truthful.
Do you prefer morning lectures or evening lectures?
Midday.
Midday.
I don't like evening. I don't like staying here late. I also don't like coming here early.
Fair enough. Favorite place that you always wanted to visit?
Favorite place I've always wanted to visit. I'd like to go to India one day. I'd like to go to Southeast Asia one day. I've been a lot of places. I've been everywhere in Western Europe and North Africa.
Wow.
And China and Japan and Korea and Central America. And so I've been to lots of places, but I've never been to South Asia. I've never been to Southeast Asia. I'd like to go to Australia and New Zealand. So I've got lots of places. I like to travel. So I'll get to some more places, I'm sure.
For sure. So the last question is, if you had one superpower, what would it be?
One what?
One superpower.
One superpower. Oh my goodness. One superpower. Probably be fun if you could fly, right?
Yeah, maybe
If I
you
could
want to
fly, that'd
fly.
be cool. I don't really, I tend to be a little. The problem with being a lawyer, you tend to be cynical about everything, and you look at everything literally. So the notion that you'd have a superpower, it's like there's nobody's got a superpower. That's kind of how a lawyer
It's
would approach that.
fictional.
It's
Yeah.
just a waste of my time to think about that. But sure,
Okay.
being able to fly, why not?
Okay, awesome then. So that is the wrap.
Immortality, yeah, whatever.
Oh, immortality,
I don't
yeah?
know. I don't know. You want to live forever, but hey, I'm just,
Maybe you wanna see how future is going to turn out to be.
eh,
That's amazing. So that is a wrap.
thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.